Hey, thank you, Eleanor. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Like Eleanor said, my name is Andrew Golombiewski. I have been in IT and sales for about 20 years, and the last 13 have been here at Second Gear. And before coming to Second Gear, I actually managed a help desk at a large school district where we were the first district to go one-to-one in the US. So, good experience there. With me, I have Chad Hunt. Chad has been with the organization for 2 years now, coming here with about 7 years experience in IT and sales as well. He got his start in IT in the Army, where he was an IT specialist, specifically working with end user hardware. So before I kind of hand it over to Chad, I wanted to briefly give some information about Second Gear. So Second Gear is part of the Insight family. Our one sister division is IFS, our financial services division. They are our leasing arm, and Red 8 is our VAR and systems integrator. And out of our Albuquerque tech center, we ship about 150,000 units annually, which is one of the reasons we're able to maintain our MAR status. And being a MAR, it allows us to be able to provide that genuine Windows 10 licenses and a certificate of authenticity from Microsoft guaranteeing the legitimacy of the product. And there are about 30 Microsoft authorized refurbishers in the world, and 12 of them are in the US. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to Chad, who will be answering this question for us.
Awesome.
How should you approach technology acquisitions with an uncertain budget beyond 2020?
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Yeah, this is a really important question that a lot of us have been challenged with, especially over the last 3 months. There's been a lot of uncertainty. So, yeah, many organizations are in the unknown of what their budget is going to look like for 2020 and beyond. And we are currently experiencing budget cuts towards technology, and in some cases, full-on buying freezes. And IT teams are facing the challenge of restrained resources while moving into a remote environment. And in a lot of cases, they're also needing to acquire more hardware with those limited resources. So refurbished hardware provides a unique opportunity to help us solve problems, meet use case needs, and honor some of these restrained budgets at the same time. However, I do understand, and us as Second Gear understand that refurbished hardware doesn't make sense for every use case. So we do take a consultative approach when trying to identify the right machine for the project. So that being said, I'd strongly recommend these questions when we're looking to make a hardware purchase. And I know many of us already are asking these questions. They're kind of standard. But I think as we continue to ask these questions, if we can be more honest with the answers, that'll allow us to stay within our budget and get as much done as possible with the limited resources that we have. Once we kind of answer these questions, we can move on to a device selection. And really that comes down to specs and performance. Is it available, and what kind of user experience and support are you looking for? Really important here on the specs part. I think a lot of the folks that we've been working with over the last 3 months have understood that what specs do they need, and kind of moving from a lot of nice to haves to more of a need to have in this area, because we see often where people kind of overload on nice to haves, and it really leads to overbuying in some cases, which again, with this kind of uncertainty around budget and hardware availability, that can kind of cripple us in the long run. So one final thought before we move on to some actual use case examples where we used new or refurbished hardware for some projects. I just wanted to talk about a misconception around refurbished hardware, that is, it has a shorter life expectancy than new hardware. And that is actually untrue. All hardware, you can't really guarantee a life expectancy, but you can guarantee functionality over a certain period of time, which we do with our warranty. And just like a new product, if we were, to have offered you a product and it went down, we would be able to support that with replacing any parts or replacing the full machine, so you can continue to have that functionality. And a new manufacturer would do the same thing. So I wanted to touch on this first use case here. This example was for a client that was a large domestic call center, around $200 million in revenue, with 4,000 employees all over the United States. So if we look at kind of the 4 questions that we had touched on earlier, they are looking to refresh their agent stations to Win 10. A lot of us did that early this year and late last year. Their use case is going to be mainly web-based apps. They have a soft phone application and shared storage. So really low processing power required for pretty much all of that. Actually, if we went in and did the minimum technical requirements for these applications, we would see that they only actually require 2 cores of 2 CPU cores to actually function, and that'll come up a little bit later. So the scope of the project is 3,600 units across 18 locations, with 2 different client images being deployed, and there was no actual budget up front, but it came down to kind of the best option. And then finally, the project was to be rolled out over a 6-month period with staggered shipments. So when we go into the actual device selection, we were comparing the Dell Optiplex 9010 from Microsoft, or from Second Gear, and the Dell Optiplex 7060 from New Dell, which we would provide through our sister company, Red 8. So both of these units would have been available, 3,600 units would have been available at the time. And if we look at the specs and performance, at face value, both of these are the same. When we provide our refurbished hardware, we're able to customize the specs. So both of these have an M.2 SATA SSD. The RAM is marginally different, but the biggest difference is in the CPU, which in the 8th gen CPU, we can see that there's a 78% better score on the pass mark test. And I'll be referencing the pass mark test a couple of times. So what that is, it's a third party kind of a company that grades all CPUs on their ability to perform certain tasks. And really the big gap in the score there comes from the 8th gen CPU having 2 extra cores. So moving on into support, both of them would be able to provide a 4-year warranty, and we'd be able to leverage our tech center to provide imaging and staggered deliveries, where we could stage the hardware and deliver it over that 6-month time. So this, when it came down to it, the client opted to go with the refurbished unit, and they went with the refurbished unit because it solved the problem. It could handle all of the use cases, and they could have the same support and services, all for around 58% less cost. And taking a quick look at this, I know, most people, if you were just to kind of take this at face value, 78% better sounds like, that's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we just go with that? But really, that's kind of what I mentioned before, and falling into overbuying on nice-to-haves. Really, the 78% better performance would have provided a slightly better user experience, but it's almost 80%. If we look at the minimum technical requirements to perform the tasks at hand, it's almost an 80% overbuy on that machine to perform the same tasks. So when we came down to it, and we were speaking with our technology leaders here at this company, they were more interested in using that 58% savings in other IT projects than acquiring 80% better performance for a marginal ROI. So that's one of our use cases with a commercial client. And then moving on, we have another client here. This is a large public school district in the Southwest. They have about 15,000 students and $175 million a year budget. So kind of following the same suit, they were looking to refresh end of lease hardware before the school year started in August. The use case was for one-to-one student devices, and we're all familiar with Chromebooks. They're very low processing power. Chrome OS, all web-based apps, so not a lot to handle there. The scope of the project was pretty significant, 12,500 units across 13 locations with staggered deliveries. This was out to bid, so we didn't have a hard budget, but they would like to work with one vendor for leasing all of their services and hardware. And then finally, the bid would be awarded in May for a July delivery. So when we came to the table, we had these two products that we offered. We had in-house with second gear an HP Chromebook. And we also, through Red 8, were able to provide a Lenovo 100E Chromebook. So again, both of these, units available, nothing, different, no differentiation there. Really, again, with the specs, it comes down to the CPU performance. And the new Lenovo model would perform 66% better according to their pass mark test. When it comes down to support, we'd be able to leverage our technology center to provide, white glove services, and we'd also be able to leverage our leasing arm, IFS, to provide all of the leasing around that. So both of these, I think all Chromebooks come with a standard 1-year warranty. So with our partner Security, we were able to extend that to 3 years with extended accidental coverage, which is very important in the school districts. So at the end of the day, when it came down to make a decision, the client wanted to go with the new product. And the reason they wanted to go with the new product is because both of these options solved all of the problems. We'd be able to do everything. It really came down to a small technical difference. And the technical difference being that the new product performed better while only being marginally more in price. And when I say marginally, I mean single-digit percentage. So when it came down to that purchasing decision, it made more sense for the client to go with the new product, being that they would get those nice to haves while also being able to complete the rest of the project smoothly. So with these examples with Chromebooks, we often see that a lot of Chromebooks kind of fall into the same price bucket, and there's not a lot of difference there. It really comes down to what services are provided around it. And there are some cases where we're able to provide refurbished units for much cheaper. We actually just had a recent case where we had about 20,000 Chromebooks that were available and ready to go, and they came at a significant discount. So we had a lot of clients take advantage of that. But for our average Chromebook engagement, it typically comes down to a pretty small price difference. And then for our last example here, we actually did a very similar project within the last 2 months with a large BPO and with the school district. And there were 2 separate projects, but almost identical in the product offerings and scope of the project. So we were looking to enable end users that were currently on desktops in an office space to be able to work remotely. This kind of came out like right at the peak of the quarantine when everybody was moving out of the office to a full-time work at home situation. So as you guys are all probably familiar with the Zoom calls, and that was very important for this project. Web-based apps and shared cloud storage, as well as Microsoft Office Suite, all very important for this project. The scope of the project was 500 laptops, and because it had come on so abruptly, there really wasn't a budget. It was more of a, hey, we just need to do this. Just tell us what we're going to spend. And then obviously, this had to be done as soon as possible due to the uncertainty around how long we would be quarantined and, the strict mandates around working at home. So with this project, we offered a Dell Latitude 7450 from second gear, and we offered a Dell 7400 through our sister company, Red 8. Both of them, again, technically very similar. The availability was a big differentiator here. Our refurbished product we had on hand ready to ship out at a moment's notice, and we would be able to meet the delivery time of 2 to 3 weeks, where at this particular time, the new product was actually going to take 60 to 90 days to actually deliver, which was left a little too much time and uncertainty around, those people being able to work. Again, we'll see that the biggest difference came here in the CPU, which is significantly had better performance than the 5th gen on the refurbished unit. So you can see there it's 150%, 56% better. When it came to support, both, very similar support up to a 5-year warranty, advanced cross ship. And really, when it came down to making the decision on this project, although the new product performed 156% better as far as the CPU goes, it would have left the client pretty tight on their budget, and it wouldn't meet the timeline. With the refurbished unit, we would be able to save them about 68% and exceed their expectations on timeline. So when it came to make a decision, the client ultimately went with the used product for this project, and it really came down to availability. There was a lot of businesses that closed their doors for not being able to transition to a fully remote environment fast enough. And in some instances, school districts were kind of crippled as well from not being able to make the transition as well. So that was the driving factor behind this. But I think even if we took that off the table, the significant price savings here, being able, if we look at these both, they're both going to handle all of the use cases and be able to solve the problem. But the refurbished unit offers a 68% savings versus the 156% better CPU performance. So in that case, that is a huge nice to have. Again, all of those applications for this use case, the minimum technical requirements for that, the refurbished model would do that and exceed the minimal technical requirements, where the new one obviously would blow them out of the water, but again, at what cost? So if we look at this from let's move away from as many nice to haves as possible so we can be conservative moving forward with our budget. In my opinion, I think that the refurbished hardware would make the most sense to stay in that conservative mindset until things become a little bit more clear, at least. So kind of closing out the examples there, we mentioned a lot of different services and our sister companies quite a few times throughout the use cases there. And I wanted to just take a moment to talk about some of the services we provided. So our white glove service, for those that aren't familiar, that is simply, we prepare and package the unit in a way that when the end user receives it out of the box, it's ready to be used right then. Image creation and deployment can be make the project much more efficient as well. We have a in-house FTP server where we can have client images securely uploaded, where we can download it, test those images, and deploy them onto a few machines to make sure they're running well. We can also overnight, your hard drive or SSD out to our facility, so we can deploy that. And then we're also able to deploy multiple images across, a batch of units. As far as asset tagging and management goes, we create trackable tags on each one of your assets. I know that's very popular in the education space when it comes to Chromebooks. being able to figure out and manage where all those Chromebooks are at one time. And that actually leads me a little bit into our leasing. IFS, our leasing company, they provide all of our leasing. They're a sister company, the largest privately owned leasing firm in the United States. And they have a proprietary asset management tool that lets you track all of your leasing lines and when they begin to mature. And you can also track every asset that's in those individual leasing lines. So as things come off lease, you know that, okay, I have X amount of units that are coming off lease and will need to be refreshed. So all of that comes on one pane of glass, and it's a great way to stay on top of your asset management. And then with our warranties, all of our refurbished products, with a few exemptions, come with a standard 3-year warranty that can be extended out to 5, and in some cases longer. And then we also partner, you probably heard me mention Security a couple of times there. We partner with the company Security that gives us even more warranty support as far as accidental damage coverage, as well as some other things there. And then for staging and multi-site delivery, we take advantage of our tech center, which is in Albuquerque. It's about 38,000 square feet. And we can, store, stage, and ship out on a staggered schedule any units that need to be sent out. So for the example of the first use case where it was 3,600 units, there was only 3 technicians deploying those units. So they needed to have them sent out in batches of about 500 for them to be able to handle. So although they purchased all of them at one time, they couldn't physically handle all 3,600 being dropped off at their front door. And then in closing, just wanted to mention our demo program. If you are interested about learning about refurbished hardware or where this might make sense in your environment, we can connect you with a rep that manages your area, and they can help you identify a machine that would work best for you. And then we can send that out to you free of charge. We'll cover the shipping both ways. It'll have a Windows 10 trial on it. You can play around with it for 2 weeks, run some tests on it, try to upload some applications, and just kind of get a feel for the user experience. And then when you're done with it, we'll cover the shipping back. So that's how the demo program works. But at this time, I just wanted to open up or pass this over to Elle for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So we did have a few questions come in through the chat. Question 1 was, so you mentioned refurbished and new equipment in your use cases. So how does Second Gear, how are they able to provide both refurb and new?
Yes, that's a great question. So kind of going back to the slide where Andrew was mentioning, the Insight Investments family of companies. So there's Second Gear, Red 8, and IFS under Insight Investments. Red 8 is our value-added reseller, and we are able to provide and source any new hardware or software through them and be able to provide that on a separate piece of paper. So although we're 2 separate companies, we do work together very often to bring multiple options to the table.
Awesome. And then the other question is, where does all the refurbished gear come from?
That's a great question. The majority of our refurbished hardware comes off lease from our sister company, IFS. If that hardware is being returned at the end of the lease, we take that back in and we refurbish it and then resell it. We also work with some strategic partners that do the same thing. As hardware comes off lease or is available, we'll buy that and refurbish it. That actually brings up another point. A lot of people kind of have a misconception of refurbished hardware being defective at some point, which isn't necessarily the case, although it could have been. Probably 9 times out of 10, the hardware had just been used before, and we're restoring it to a like new condition so that when the end user receives it, the functionality is there and the aesthetics are as close to like new as possible.
Awesome. That's it for our questions. Chad, big thanks to you. Also, Andrew, thank you so much for your time today on the presentation. Like Chad mentioned, if you have any questions, reach out to your Second Gear representative, or you can always email us at the team at info@secondgear.com. Thanks everyone again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.